Hi, I'm Matthew Herzberg, and this is the Myopia Mindset. This is the podcast that gives you motivation, education, and inspiration on your path to success with myopia management. And I have assembled a fantastic panel for an episode that I've been wanting to do for a while. This is an episode that was requested specifically by the audience of the Myopia Mindset. Various subscribers to the podcast have reached out and wanted us to do a deep dive specifically on orthokeratology. And I thought, why don't I get some of our podcast favorites to join me in a panel to talk about that. First, I'll introduce Dr. Leah Johnson, who is a leading expert in myopia management and specialty contact lenses. She's trained hundreds of doctors worldwide, held key roles at Paragon Vision Sciences and Cooper Vision, and teaches at the University of Houston. Dr. Johnson brings a deep expertise and passion for patient care at her practice, Innovative Eye Care. Leah, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me back, Matt.
Yeah, and also you'll recognize Matthew Martin. He's a monthly regular on the podcast. He's one of the most prolific speakers in myopia. He serves his patients at Auburn Optical, and you can find him center stage at Vision by Design. Matthew Martin, welcome back to the podcast.
As always, I am ridiculously excited to talk about my all-time favorite subject in eye care, which is Ortho-K, hands down.
Awesome. And you'll recognize Dr. Cary Herzberg. He's a contributor to the podcast. He's our reigning champion. He's one of the all-time gurus, pioneers of Ortho-K, and has been responsible for leading the path of so many towards success in orthokeratology and myopia management specifically. Cary, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks, Matt. It's glad to be here with this amazing panel that we're going to have tonight. I'm really excited.
Yeah, and this is going to be a great deep dive. What I'm calling this episode is Ortho-K, every benefit parents need to hear and how to explain it to them clearly. And like I said, this came specifically from our audience members. So I want to thank them in particular for putting this in front of us. Dr. Emil specifically requested this episode, and so this one's for you. And if you have any suggestions for podcast episodes you'd like us to do, reach out at myopiamindset@gmail.com. And then before we get rolling, let's start with Leah again. If anyone has any questions for you about anything we've talked about in this episode, how can they get in touch with you online?
They can email me. I'll just put my email in the chat box. They can just email my Dr. Leah at innovativeeye.care. That's my personal email for my clinic, and they can ask me all kinds of things about Ortho-K or myopia.
Perfect. Matthew Martin, how about yourself?
Yeah, I can be reached obviously through Facebook Messenger, such a classic, but I'd really prefer an email, and my email is very simple. I'm not going to put it in the chat. It is simply auburnoptical@gmail.com. It comes directly to me, and if you send me an email, I will respond. I will help in any way that I can.
Awesome. And Dr. Cary Herzberg, if anybody wants to get in contact with you, how can they do so?
Yeah, OAADOC@gmail is the best way.
It's a classic. All right, so let's get right into it, because this is going to be a meaty episode for sure. We're going to go into Ortho-K benefits and how to explain them to parents, and we've assembled a list of 20 or so items. So I'm just gonna turn it over to you guys. Let's start with the first one in our list. Ortho-K corrects all levels of myopia, even higher amounts, depending on the experience of the fitter. And Cary, I'm going to start with you because we started this list. You started this list for the podcast. So let's start with you for number one. So what did you mean by corrects all level of myopia and higher amounts depending on the experience of the fitter?
Yeah, basically the only limitation to Ortho-K is your imagination. They can make lenses today within microns of accuracy. The lading process is amazing. The topographers have improved dramatically, and they reached a level now that we're talking in that micron department. So basically, you can do many things here you can't do with LASIK because of that. Because it's just make a lens. Basically design a lens. So basically, whatever you can think about, putting your mind that you want to do, then just laying that lens out and then basically getting it to execution. Now, certainly there are limitations. Some of the limitations, as I talked about, are experience that you have to have. I wouldn't, if I was a first-time fitter, I wouldn't be starting out with very difficult cases. I'd be doing easier cases and working up on that. But there's also limitations on designs, and that's where it gets kind of crazy because our Ortho-K specialists out there, and many and the two on the panel here represent that. They can then take a lens and then design basically, if they want to design something, just specify what they want to change in the lens design to make it happen. So it's just amazing. I've seen in my experience in fitting lenses. I thought, well, let's fool around a little bit. Let's see what happens. So I've changed the fit only like 2 or 3 microns. I said, okay, let's loosen this 2 or 3 microns. It completely changes the fit within a couple of microns. It's just startling to see that, because that's anything in your office really that's as accurate as that. Even lasers aren't that as accurate as that Ortho-K design.
Yeah, let's keep it going. I'll hand it over then to Matthew Martin. What do you think about the first point? And let's focus also on how you communicate this to your parents. So it's one thing that it corrects all levels of myopia, depending on the experience of the fitter. So based on your experience, what is the best way to communicate this to parents?
Well, with regards to the amount of myopia, I have a fair amount of patients who fall outside of the parameters of the traditional myopia management soft contact lenses. For instance, MiSight, or sometimes even like the VTI Natural View, some of the lenses I use for myopia management. I have patients who maybe have more astigmatism than I want to deal with. I can design that astigmatism in an Ortho-K lens quite straightforward and correct it quite neatly with really great results. I find if I'm using, say, a MiSight lens, for example, I get over 1 1/4, 1.5 diopters of SIL, and I don't find that the myopia management, at least in my office, is as accurate or as effective as I would like it to be. But I can design that into an Ortho-K retainer. I can make that Ortho-K lens give me that full correction for the astigmatism and also give me that really good myopia management aspect of things. So for me, what it comes down to is when I'm having the discussion about what route to go, sometimes I'll say to the parent, look, I can do it here, but we might have to put glasses over the top, or we can do it and wrap it up in one neat bundle and have good success. Leah, do you have a different perspective on that? I know that you've worked perhaps more with some of those lenses.
I would say absolutely. My thing is quality of life. We have these patients, an adult, you wouldn't put a patient with, 125, 150 SIL in a spherical soft contact lens. That's just not a good quality of life. Kids, they're not driving in their visual demands, but they're playing sports. I have little kids playing hockey and they need to have, good attention to detail. So I think the beauty of Ortho-K is that you are able to give these kids, you are able to correct those higher amounts of astigmatism and give them great vision and quality of life.
Mm-hmm. And how are you communicating that then to the parent? Because that's something that we can definitely understand. If you're interested in Ortho-K or you're using Ortho-K, you get that. But what is the best way to communicate that to parents, Leah?
I just tell them that MiSight is a spherical lens, and maybe if there's really, I personally don't like to, if I were to put this patient, an adult or any patient, right, in a toric lens, then I tell them, I'm like, hey, this is a spherical lens. So your patient, or your kid has astigmatism and they're going to see better in a, lens that corrects their astigmatism. With Ortho-K, we're able to achieve that. I always like kids in daily disposable lenses. I know lots of parents like that too, just the convenience, the hygiene, fresh new lens. I have had some parents where the kid is a little bit borderline of that 1 diopter of cylinder. And because we have trials, we can test it out in the office right then and there. And it's kind of been a 50-50 on the personality of the kid. And, if they are okay with that vision, if so, then it's more of a lifestyle choice. If not, okay, now we know that we want to go forward with Ortho-K to fully correct that, that patient's vision.
Yeah. And Matthew, how are you best communicating this to the parents?
Well, I'm actually going to skip past the communication and ask Leah a question. And that is, When you have fit the child with a diopter of SIL into a spherical myopia management lens, do you feel like you're getting the slowing of myopia that you would normally be getting with a child who maybe didn't have that diopter of SIL?
Oh, so like in terms of efficacy.
Yes, because I find, for me, because we're so axial length oriented, that the cases where I didn't correct or I left the uncorrected SIL, I don't think it seems to have worked as well for my patients.
So, Matt, you're going to have more experience. I've been doing Ortho-K, but actually managing my own Ortho-K patients or myopia patients has only been, I'm coming up 3 years in June. What I will say is that I'm pretty selective of my MySight patients, and the ones that have had a little bit of SIL, they haven't changed or haven't
Okay.
progressed. But my practice is kind of fairly new, where we're measuring axial length, right? 2.5 years. And so I would also say, because my specialty is Ortho-K and I get patients referred to me for Ortho-K, I'm a little biased. People come to me because they're like, oh, my kid has astigmatism, and I know that I'm not the best example, right? They're coming to me because they want to be fit in Ortho-K.
Okay.
Yeah. Great question. It's an aberration. Astigmatism is one of those aberrations, but maybe it's not an aberration that's going to control myopia, like spherical aberration. So I think, this is worth pursuing, that you're seeing that kind of difference in your MySight patients, with astigmatism. I think that's valuable, very valuable.
That is because both you two have been tracking axial length, for a decade. So more, right? I mean,
Yeah, more.
I'm just saying way
Not a
more.
decade here. I wish it was a decade, but Cary was way ahead of me on that one.
Yeah, but to really look at those changes. I haven't noticed any specific changes, I will say, but also I'm very selective and want those children to have good quality of vision, which would be in Ortho-K lenses.
Yeah.
Sorry, I took us off the rails there,
No,
Matt.
no, that's
No.
very typical for Matthew Martin. So I'm ready for it. I encourage it. Let's take the conversation wherever it needs to go. Let's then talk about correcting low to moderate hyperopia. Cary, why don't you start us out on this one?
Well, that's I had an interesting take on this one because I started out doing this for treating amblyopia in high hyperopia, basically one eye being hyperopic, the other being close to plano. And I found, and actually wrote a paper about this, was published in China, but I found actually improved results with this, with treating amblyopia with an Ortho-K lens, because it's got more of a pinhole effect on the macula. And so I actually was able to do more with my amblyopic patients. Even patients that responded to treatment with other means actually responded to Ortho-K. But on your topic of hyperopia, yes, look, at hyperopes are always in need of plus. It's a forever thing. You can't give them enough plus. I think we underestimate this. So in Ortho-K, we can design hyperopic designs that actually provide even multifocal effects in the mid periphery that can actually sustain a near point stress for a hyperope and actually make that a lot better for them. So I found really great success with this. It's also a marvelous thing that I've used in patients that are presbyopic that are on computer screens all day. So they're just they might be low hyperopes, but they are using a lot more than low hyperopia to do those screens. So it's a wonderful therapy and treatment for these, I think, the CVS and these other kinds of near point stresses that are going on, and certainly our hyperopes want freedom. They don't want to wear glasses. They're used to not having to wear anything. All of a sudden, the bottom falls out when they're 35, and then they can't focus and they can't see. But hyperopic design is a learning curve. Again, it's something that I would recommend going to a place like Vision by Design to learn how to do this, or taking workshops on it, because it's the opposite of myopic. It's you're pushing inward instead of pulling outward. It's more the push in and create the steeper center part of the cornea.
Yeah, and Matthew Martin, do you have a lot of experience with hyperopic Ortho-K patients?
Yeah, I've been doing hyperopic Ortho-K honestly for probably about 20 years, but my success has been mixed, or at least early on. I finally we did an episode on translimbal hyperopic Ortho-K, and that has been really pretty super. So the patients that do well on that really absolutely love that. because that's that larger design. It's more comfortable. You can push more plus there and get a better result. Obviously, there's a lot to learn, and I feel like the learning curve for myself, I still have a long ways to go. Like it's going to be a never-ending learning thing. But man, some of my patients are just bonkers about it. I have one particular one in mind who's a pastor who he just loves it. He's like, this is the best. I can read my paperwork. I can see my congregation. He's like, this is wonderful. It has been really, really fun to start exploring more of that. Now, I've got some children too, which talking about a very off-label here, but I have worked with some children who were isophoric position, and then we're able to push that plus with the hyperopic Ortho-K. Now, those weren't necessarily translimbal designs, but the results there have been fantastic. I can think of at least two of them who went from struggling with their hockey game, because we were discussing hockey, to just being rock stars. And it's because they wear their retainers. They get that extra plus they need. It seems to just work better for them. And the success for those kids has been out of sight. Comfort's been good. Health has been good. It's been a really good experience.
Yeah, for sure. And Leah, any experience with hyperopic Ortho-K? And then let's also talk about how do you communicate that to your patients, because it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, no, I love hyperopic Ortho-K. I think it is so fun and awesome to be able to give this option to patients. They're so grateful. They love it. Had adults, patients, even presbyopes. They're all, they're just so excited about the lifestyle of it all. I think one of my favorite cases has been like a plus for little girl. She was probably 11 or 12, and she was a dancer, and she also had accommodative esotropia too, right? And so she had to always wear her glasses, but when you're dancing, you can't wear your glasses on performance stage and things like that. And we were able to give her enough plus so that she doesn't have that accommodative esotropia. And it's just an amazing option that I don't think enough doctors know about. And Matthew, I was really curious. Yeah, I saw your latest podcast on the translimbal. I haven't done translimbal, so I'm not doing that for hyperopic Ortho-K, but it's really awesome. I love it.
Hi there. I hope you're enjoying part 1 of this episode. Part 2 is going to be available next week for our paid subscribers. And this is the part of the podcast where I would be taking a quick break to tell you about one of our sponsors. But the simple fact of the matter is, we don't have any sponsors. The Myopia Mindset survives exclusively on the generosity of its audience, listeners and viewers just like you, who either believe in our mission to spread the word about how awesome myopia management is, because we need more ECPs online doing it and doing it confidently and doing it successfully. Or maybe you're one of the audience members who have been learning from our content directly. Or maybe you listen to the podcast as part of that motivation and inspiration aspect to it. You listen to it on the way to the practice. I've heard from some of you that do that, or you're listening to it while you're walking the dog, or you listen to it while you're winding down for the day, or while you're closing down the practice. And if the Myopia Mindset is a benefit to you, if you are interested in becoming a paid subscriber, you can do so on our Substack, myopiamindset.substack.com, the cost of which is just $12 a month, which I said, hey, that's the cost of a cup of coffee each and every week. And if you would buy me a cup of coffee to have on amazing guests to nerd out about myopia management, then please consider becoming a paid subscriber of the Myopia Mindset. You can do so on our Substack. Like I mentioned, paid subscribers are going to get part 2s of every single episode that we do. But we've also started doing articles on our Substack. I've been taking a year's worth of content. I've been making clips. I've been putting them in front of Cary, and I've been saying, hey, can you give us like a short article, a short piece, write a little something about this particular topic from your perspective? Cary has over 40 years of experience in myopia management. He's one of the pioneers of our industry, and he has been writing some great content. It has been really working out really, really well. If any of this is appealing to you, then please consider becoming a paid subscriber of the Myopia Mindset. Myopiamindset.substack.com is how you do so. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the episode. let's also talk about decreasing the incidence of high myopia in progressive myopes. That's the next one on our list. Let's start with you, Matthew Martin. Your take on this one and how you communicate it to parents.
Yeah, I think we spoke a little bit about this earlier, and that is that when I'm looking at my different options for myopia management, I talk to patients. I have sort of like a little introductory page that talks about Stellus, that talks about myopia management, soft contact lenses. It talks about low-dose atropine. I go through and discuss those things, but I tell them truthfully, this one actually only does about 30%. This one is kind of more like 50%, although the studies claim it's more. But my Ortho-K patients, I get the most myopia management hands down with my Ortho-K patients. I just had one today. He was a very significantly progressing myope. I think we followed him for 9 months or a year. He was moving like zero point 0.4 millimeters a year, so really growing quite a bit. Started him on Ortho-K with a wave design that I put together that I really liked. Came in today for a 6-month follow-up, and his axial length measurements are actually negative axial length measurements from a change perspective. So that's probably suggesting that the choroid is thickening, right? But it's also telling me that we're doing such a rock and roll job slowing this guy's progression that he's either moved none at all or he's actually had some choroidal thickening, suggesting that we've really put the brakes on his myopia. And 0.4 is a pretty significant growth in a year.
Huge,
So we were very motivated to slow this kid down. And I see a lot of that with Ortho-K. I know Cary spoke about it before. I've had patients, oh, geez, I've been doing this now for a while, 23 years, something along those lines. And I have patients I started who are still doing Ortho-K or who did Ortho-K for 15 years, and their prescription became a half diopter stronger over 15 years. I mean, how do you argue with that? You just don't. It's stunning.
Yeah, for sure. And Cary, you've been seeing patients for, a lifetime. Your patients are now having or have kids of their own.
Yeah, they're doing Ortho-K.
We were joking around about before we started recording that Leah is actually seeing one of your patients that moved into her area. So what do you
still doing it?
Share your experiences here with decreasing incidence of high myopia.
It's like you have my patient population 90% Chinese, right? So in Aurora, Illinois, and so it's a high risk group. And most of these patients did not come in. At least the SIBs, the younger SIBs came in early enough, but the older SIBs didn't. So you had some high prescriptions that you were dealing with. And the vast majority of these patients, we're sitting with them now when they're in their 20s and their 30s now, and their axial lengths are under 26. And I'm looking at the parents don't come in as often as I'd like to because the kids drive themselves. Obviously, they come in to visit and they see me. But the thing is, it's a victory, right, guys? It's a victory because you've now done it. You talked. I've given you. Hopefully, keep your fingers crossed. But you have better odds now of maintaining ocular health for the rest of your life. I mean, that you're not going to be afflicted with these things. It's like the plague. This epidemic of myopia. So we are succeeding with this earlier onset. Earlier treatment's the better. But I can tell you, we're dealing, with patients that are now multiple, decades of wearing Ortho-K lenses that are very stable. And by the way, as far as, a return on investment, these patients continue wearing the Ortho-K, not because their myopia continues to progress, but because they just don't want to do anything else. They love the fact that they can see during the day. They love the freedom, so they continue wearing Ortho-K because they couldn't think of anything else, that they'd rather do than do that. So yes, I put a big exclamation point on what Matt was saying.
Yeah, for sure. Leah, from your point of view, and how are we communicating this to parents?
In just terms of decreasing that incidence of high myopia, I mean, if we're typically children, I would say tend to progress right up 50% up till 16, 75 up to 18, maybe 90% up to 21. So when we see these children at whatever age they're at, I'm like, okay, so you've got a 50% chance. If you have a 9-year-old and they're already a -1, every year they're going to increase. And even at 15 or 16, there's only that 50% that they're, not going to that they'll stabilize. But given the stress of digital near work and indoor indoor time and all of those things. Higher learning education and those visual demands, there's that much higher risk. And so with all of this, we want to keep their eyes as healthy as possible. And so just kind of depending on how much time I have with the parent versus a consultation versus I'm in a 20-minute comprehensive exam talking about, here are some of the main facts that we need to know and trying to keep the eyes healthy. But a lot of times when I tell them about, that 15 to 18 year and how young their kid is and why we want to, keep it as low as possible, they're like, yeah, my kid's got a lot of years to grow. So we want to do something about it.
Yeah, for sure. And we touched on multifocal soft contact lenses a little bit already. So let's go to the next one. As far as correcting presbyopia in a similar fashion, that's next on the list. Matthew Martin, you had your hand raised, or did you want to make another point? No, go ahead.
Can we talk about the fact that I have patients who've done Ortho-K for years, and then they'll say, I think I'm going to go away from it. And I'm like, no problem. We wash them out. We put them in contact lenses and glasses. A year goes by, they come back and they're like, I want to be refit in Ortho-K again. I'm like, why? Because I love it way more than I like glasses, way more than I like contact lenses. People just like Ortho-K. And once they've worn Ortho-K successfully, they want to stick with it. Cary, I'm sure you're in the same boat on this.
Yeah, it's so true, Matt. And it just, there's no, the parents, sometimes when they go to college, the parents will say, well, because they're going to college, shouldn't they, stop doing Ortho-K? And the child will, well, he's not a child anymore, but the young person looks at them and thinks that they're like an alien from Mars. They said, why would I want to wear, these are kids that never had experienced daily wear glasses or contact lenses. All they've experienced is Ortho-K. They say, are you kidding me? I'll make this work, whatever way it has to work. I'll make this work. Yes, absolutely. Again, it's an amazing experience.
I was going to say, I get these 20-year-olds who are now moving to the Phoenix, Arizona area. Sometimes I have to wash them out. That lens, it's been a few years and the lens is decentered. Put them in soft contacts. They are so excited to get back into their Ortho-K lenses. They're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, now you know what soft lens is. Do you want to continue? They're like, no way. Get me back in I can't wait to get started again in Ortho-K. So yeah, it's totally true.
Yeah. And I'm going to make a point. Hopefully I don't get into trouble for saying this, but when you think about the power of the effect of Ortho-K on a patient who is college age, because you're going to college, you're going out, you're meeting people, you're drinking, you're away from your parents, you're experimenting with life and figuring out who you are. And, hey, I can't, hang out later because I got to put in my Ortho-K lenses is kind of an obstacle to pursuing those kind of interests. Leah, go ahead.
I will say though, for long-term Ortho-K wearers, many of them, and Dr. Herzberg, your patient too, that she's 36, been wearing it since she was 7.
Right.
They can skip a night and still see okay. Mm-hmm. And I see this even in those college. If they started, it's been a while, they don't notice a thing. And it's a day, maybe 2 days or so before they're like, oh yeah, I need to pop my lenses back in. So a little wiggle room.
For sure. Yeah. Did the three of you ever communicate that to the parents that hey, this is what we expect in the beginning. You're going to have to wear them all the time. But as this progresses, you may not, have to wear them every single night. Is that a common thing that you can communicate to parents, or
absolutely? For me, parents love that flexibility. I mean, kids are going to camp, or they'll go for a weekend thing and sleepovers. And the fact that the parent doesn't have to worry about, that's just another beauty of Ortho-K. It's just like, nope, you can skip that one night, start back when you get home tomorrow. You'll be fine. Right.
Yeah. All right, let's get back to corrects presbyopia in a similar fashion to multifocal soft contact lenses. Whichever one of you wants to take this one, I got a little bit disrupted there, but why is this one important? Cary, you put this one on the list. Let's start with you. Why is this one important, and how do we communicate it to parents?
It's an amazing thing when you think about it, because of course I'm an old-fashioned. I come from my education was in the binocular vision, functional vision field. We got it really emphasized in using vision training, other means to improve eyesight, improve performance, visual performance. So I've found in my lifetime that plus is really, extra plus of close work, extra plus in the prescription at that point, and computer use, whatever it is very helpful for these patients. It takes away strain. They need it. 75% of our patients have CVS, basically by definition, if they spend more than 2 hours on a computer screen. So here's a lens that actually causes with an aspheric surface, creates a plus zone in there, creates an ad, basically. And this ad then keeps these kids out of trouble, basically. It keeps them from straining, it keeps all that extra plus in there. They get really spoiled. Patients who've done this and they go into their 30s and 40s now, their colleagues are wearing reading glasses. They're not. I've seen them go without even doing a multifocal, bifocal design for them purposely. They can go into their late 40s without needing anything for close work. So they're like, this is like freedom. Like, put the big S on my chest. I'm supervision person, because that's what they're doing. They're outperforming everybody else, basically. Where everybody else is now, very reliant on close work prescriptions, they're not.
Yeah. And Matthew and Leah, anything to add?
Yeah, I actually see this quite a bit. I have patients who have been wearing Ortho-K for years. They get into that age, they should be looking at a multifocal, or maybe we're gonna have a problem with reading. They need reading glasses. It always kind of amazes me how well their visual system functions with that Ortho-K topography, that plus power built in there. It always kind of blows me away how well they do. And sometimes my staff will come back and they're like, this is patient so-and-so. And when I measure their acuities are okay. Then I ask them how they're doing, and they're like happy as can be because they don't have to wear reading glasses and they see wonderfully. And I'm like, well, then that's wonderful. That's where we're at. We're looking for happy. We're not necessarily looking for that perfect topography, but I get a lot of patients who are in that like 46, 47, 48 range. I know they should be having problems, at least I think they should be, but they're just super happy with their vision and they just want to keep going.
Yeah. And Leah?
Yeah, I agree. I have a Ortho-K patient. He's 55, and actually he sees 2015 like at 8 p.m. or anyway, I think the latest I've seen him is at 6 p.m., but it's sharp 2015. And he comes in at 55 and is like, I can't see my phone as well in the morning when I wake up after I take off my Ortho-K lenses. And I was like, you're 55 and this is the first time you've ever, and like he's worn Ortho-K for now like 30 years. So, and I told him, I was like, what other 55 person do you know that never needs a pair of reading glasses and hasn't ever had to deal with this? Anyways, so we just steepened the base curve. He's now a good 20/20 at night, and he's happy, again, reading on his phone. So I love honestly, for adults and presbyopes, it's awesome, especially for those 40-year-olds. They don't notice any difference, in terms of distance or near. To them, it's just normal. And everyone else is, struggling they'll see their friends with their reading glasses. And
Yeah, I can speak to this personally because until my son was born, I was an Ortho-K wearer. And I've been an Ortho-K wearer off and on throughout my life, but never really needed Ortho-K until my 40s, I would say. Specifically, my optometrist who does sign the lenses is on the call with me right here. But, when I was wearing my Ortho-K lenses regularly, my friends who are all in their 40s were like, I thought you wore glasses, and I wouldn't have to do that whole, like adjusting the glasses to look at things and whatever. And they were like, what happened? Like, I thought you wore glasses wear. And I was like, Ortho-K, man, like you got to look into it. It'll change your life. And this is a very overlooked demographic, in my opinion, is, adults who are in that age range who could definitely benefit and get this part of their life back that we don't like having to make this adjustment, for sure.
Yeah, especially women over 40 who have dry eye, they can't wear the soft lenses anymore. I found this to be amazing. This group is very stimulated to do this. They're really, they want to do this kind of thing. They want to, this is something they have, they're struggling. Their lenses are not working anymore because of dry eye, basically. And you can then give them this and they can give them more years of freedom.
And fix their dry eye.
If you're interested in getting the rest of the episode, consider becoming a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset. In addition to an extended version of this episode and every other episode that we do, you'll also get access to exclusive monthly bonus episodes of the Myopia Mindset. And I know you're interested. You've made it this far. You can do so on our Substack, myopiamindset.substack.com. I'll see you at the next one.